Hello, it is Hélène Guillaume on the Performance Podcast. And today I have Michel Johnson, very exciting. He participated in 3 Olympics, won 4 Olympic gold medals, and broke 4 world records, presenting the US. And I'm very inspired by him because since the last 20 years, after retiring from being a professional athlete, he's been an entrepreneur, wrote books, also did some movies, and really has been considered as one of the most consistent athletes. So very interested here to explore how he sees performance, and he, in his whole life, everything he does relates back to sport. He has a audio documentary on Audible called Defiance. So exploring what does the word defiance mean for him, the history of athletes using their platform to protest for the change they want to see in the world, going back to 1968, when the international community worked together to push South Africa out of apartheid. And he's exploring how the history of athletes who defied the system and norms to change what they saw as wrong. For instance, when Billie Jean King risked her career for what she stood for. And in his personal life, he defied conventional wisdom. For instance, it was said no one could run the 200 and 400 meters at the Olympics, so he did it. But compares how he defied the norms versus people also who actually were risking their lives, receiving death threats, which we'll see in another episode with someone I'm quite passionate about. And also how to navigate messaging. If you don't stand up, you might be criticized by a community. If you do stand up, you might lose sponsors, not have backing, etc. And then also exploring his stance on difference between female and male athletes and what do we know about it. And he says that the way we explain how the female body works at World AI and the power that we can understand from it, he never heard it explained it that way. So it's about changing the conversations, defiance, working against centuries of understanding female versus male in one way. And it's time to change the conversation. Yeah, how can we get the message out there to female and male athletes and coach? Thank you for joining today, and more right now. Michel, thank you so much. And tell us who you are, what you've done.
That's always a funny question. Tell us who you are. So I'm Michel Johnson, and so I'm a retired sprinter. I was very fortunate to represent the U.S. in 3 Olympics, 5 World Championships, and I won 4 Olympic gold medals and 8 World Championship gold medals during that time, and broke world records in 200 meters and 400 meters. And then I retired from my athletic career, and since that time, over the last 20 years since I retired, I've been an entrepreneur, been a television pundit. I've written 2 books, produced and presented documentary films. But everything I do sort of has a foundation. Michel Johnson Young Leaders, we support young people who are making an impact in their communities and sports.
Yeah.
My company, Michel Johnson Performance, provides training and consulting services to athletes and teams. So everything that I do, which is a lot, all relates back to sport. Sport has been at the core of my life for as long as I can remember.
Yeah. And you also have a podcast and a word that you're using a lot, which is defiance, which I love. Can you tell us more about throughout your career and your life, what is that, what does it mean for you, this word, and how have you lived it yourself?
Yeah, so Defiance is a podcast documentary, an 8-part series that I did for Audible. And it's an audio documentary. So that was my first time doing an audio documentary. And I just released it back in October. And the Defiance looks at the history of athletes using their platform to protest for the type of change that they want to see in the world, or to protest and push up against wrongs that they see in the world. And this dates way back before present day with Colin Kaepernick and people like Lewis Hamilton and Marcus Rashford and, people, LeBron James and stars today and Naomi Osaka pushing against the status quo. This goes all the way back to 1968, the Black Power salute, the apartheid era of South Africa when the global community of sports federations worked together to basically pressure South Africa out of apartheid using sports. So it goes all the way back to Jackie Robinson becoming the first Black athlete to play professional baseball, like Jesse Owens in 1936, Billie Jean King. So there's an interesting history of athletes and sports people defying the conventional wisdom or defying the existing system and norms that they saw that this may be the norm or this may be the existing system, but it's wrong. And they chose to defy that and work against it. So that's why I called the series Defiance.
Yeah.
In terms of my personal life, I've always wanted, even when I was competing, my goals were to do things that hadn't been done before in the sport, to defy the conventional wisdom, such as if you're a 100-meter sprinter or 200-meter sprinter, you can double up in those events. But no one, everyone said you can't do the 200 and 400. Yeah. So that's why I decided I'm going to do the 200.
The fastest man on earth, and not only in one discipline.
Yeah, exactly. So defiance has been a part of my life. I always wanting to do things differently. But getting back to the series, these are people risking their lives, not just trying to, the example I just gave of what I was doing, pales in comparison in terms of the importance when these people and the people that I interview and the stories that I cover in the documentary look at people who have received death threats and whose careers in many cases were destroyed by virtue of their using their platform to try to create change in the world.
Yeah, and I think it was really interesting the other day when we were talking about that specifically and how people actually put their career in risk, because if you speak up for something, you may not have sponsors or people may let you down or you may not be able to participate. I think what Billie Jean King had done with tennis, saying we won't participate and creating her own path is incredible. Naomi Osaka was really speaking up as well. But I think I find it really difficult to have practical recommendations or examples because it's so personal and there's so much risk. But do you have any thoughts on how people, and particularly athletes that are still discriminated today, there's kind of a role, and I think the other day you were saying that very interestingly, there's if you don't speak up, then you're criticized by your own community. If you do speak up, you might be criticized by the other side. Yeah. So how to navigate that? And
yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and I think it's unique to each individual. And you're, let's say, just as an example, if you're a Black athlete and you in America, you see all of this injustice by the system, the institutions in our country that are unfair to Black people. And you see all of these people, young people, and certainly a lot of Black people, young people, protesting and doing everything that they can to create change and bring about awareness of this injustice. And you as an athlete, as a Black athlete, there may be backlash. So there will be backlash. Yeah. Not may. There will be backlash if you jump in and start to side with these people because the issues are so polarizing and people are on one side or the other. But at the same time, if you don't, then those people from that community who are your fans, Black people, are going to say, why aren't you helping? You have this huge platform. So it's a tough position to be in. But at the end of the day, when you have, and this is the point that I make, when you have so much, you got lucky. You work hard, yes, but you're also very fortunate, very lucky. I mean, I think about as an athlete myself, all of the athletes that I grew up with, we all wanted to be professional athletes. I was the only one. So I'm very lucky. Why me? Right? So when you're that lucky and you're that fortunate to be the one, with that comes responsibility. It's not going to be easy. So is it a difficult choice? Yes, it's a difficult choice. But there's a saying that, the more you have, the more responsibility you have. And so that's the way that it is. You can make whatever choice you make as an athlete. You can choose to get in and support and use your platform and take on whatever comes with that. Or you can choose to not. You can choose to, I'm not going to do it. And again, take on whatever comes with that. And it's your choice.
Yeah, and I think like representation is really important. That seeing people changing the path. And one thing that I see like in female athletes is like they're still like underrepresented in medias and less sponsoring money. And one of the reasons we often hear is like women are actually like we're not put in media because women are less interesting. They're less strong, less fast, is less interesting. And they're not viewership either. So that means it's normal not to have the money for media. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very interesting topic. It's very complex. It's not simple. And I think it's one of those things that, just like so many other things, where in trying to understand it or trying to make sense of it or come up with a solution, we tend to, sort of look at, things in a very simple binary way. And it's a very complex situation. So there isn't an easy answer to it, in terms of what should be done to get more media, more money into female sports. It's a very complex situation. And I think that it's also one of those where just attacking one side of it isn't going to be the solution. It has to be attacked from all sides. So, and there has to be patience that it's going to take time. I think that, things like, the NBA supporting the WNBA in the way that it does is only one part of the equation. And that's why the WNBA has been able to be around for so long, because they do have that support. But at a point, it needs to be able to sustain itself. And in order to do that, you have to have the media on board in the way that they present women's sport versus the way they present men's sport. You have to, focus on building an audience, a female and a male audience. A lot of times there's the argument that, there isn't enough women watching female sports, and that's the problem. Mm-hmm. And that's not the problem. That is part of the problem. But you need more men and women watching female sport. And you don't need to, sort of characterize them so binary as men's sports and as women's sports. It's just sports. It's just people playing sports, people competing. When I watch sports, it doesn't really matter the gender, doesn't really matter the age. I just love watching people compete. And so when there's two humans of equal talent competing against one another, I don't really care. It's interesting for me to see. And I think that, so that's just an example of the complexities of all of the things that have to be done, the way the sport is presented, the way the media presents it and reports on it, the way the sports present themselves, and the way they go about creating a profitable model and the way that they actually attract fans.
I think you were talking about like stats that are actually showing that people are interested in female sports.
Well, from what I understand, and in interviewing a woman who's spent her entire life studying female sports, she was a professor at one of the universities in the U.S. What she explained was, because you often hear that, there aren't enough people interested in female sports. She didn't say that the statistics show differently. What she was saying was, there are no statistics to back that up.
Okay.
The statistics don't actually support that. And I think that there are some statistics out there that show that if indeed there was more female sport on television, more female sport content, for example, ESPN Sports Center in America, if there was more female sport presented on the flagship news program every day for mainstream sport, there will probably be more interest in those sports.
Yeah.
So again, it speaks to that complexity where it's not just this sort of simple, answer or solution to the problem. It's a bit complex.
And in terms of like training, like the professionalization of female sports and the money in there, etc. I mean, like what we're doing with World AI is basically coming from the fact that in medical research, 80% of the research is still on men, but when it comes to sports, it's like basically dramatic, like 46% go for 50%, like for women of the budgets in research. So like we are doing research. What is the female body? What does it need and why? And provide that. How have you seen have you seen a difference in the way women are trained? And you also have like this performance center. Like, do you see any differences? And like, have you seen coaches like getting on board with that and training specifically women with their female physiology?
Yeah, I think, I have seen it. We certainly have done a lot of work at Michel Johnson Performance with our team and our sports research lab, particularly with young athletes, young female athletes, trying to get to an understanding of, the cause of injury amongst female athletes and how to mitigate and reduce the risk of injury for young female athletes based on the fact that the anatomy is different and the development is different for young girls versus young boys. So there are certainly differences. I think that, our coaches and our team tends to look at every athlete, regardless of their gender, as an individual athlete. And so our focus when it comes to creating a program for that athlete to help them reach their goal is very individualized to the athlete. When that's the case, then you take out a lot of the different biases. So we have never had the bias of, well, this is a female athlete, so this is the standard that's applied, because each athlete is different. So it takes out that bias. So that's always been the case for us. Obviously, there's some sort of, you can start to cluster athletes around certain aspects of their athleticism, certain aspects of their physiology. And of course, there are a lot of similarities, of course, among female athletes that are different from male athletes. But in terms of what that means, we always remain very open to what that means, as opposed to immediately applying some sort of bias to that or some sort of representation to that well, because that means this. Yeah. And that's just always been our philosophy, which is born out of my own philosophy as an athlete. I mean, people told me, because you're, 200 meters better than you need to run the 100, don't think about the 400. People told me also, of course, when I was thinking early on that, but your running style is different from everyone else's. You run more upright, and that's not the way world-class runners run. So you need to change your running style, which I didn't. And of course, we found later that my running style and its difference was actually a huge advantage for me. So I've always taken the philosophy that, everyone's different, everyone's unique. In order to get the best out of that athlete, you need to make sure that you understand those differences and not make the assumption that because this is, this athlete is different, that's a negative, or because this athlete is female, they're only able to do this, or this athlete is male, whatever.
Yeah, and I know like with your center, you do a lot of like different tests and analysis, which is incredible. But like, I think that growing up, like doing a lot of sports, like I always had this perception, this impression that women were this like lesser version of the man, and the holy grail was having a main body basically, and women like were moody and bitchy and complicated, and losing your period was actually great because it's an annoying thing. Whereas like amenorrhea, when you lose your period, it means you're unhealthy. As an athlete, it's like early signs of low energy availability, but in the training world, that's not a perception. So like we're doing a lot of work around changing the perception of women themselves, but also like what women have on what the perception of men on women as well. So working with coaches and with athletes. So what is your take on that? It was like a word of like who athletes now that are like professionals, not professionals, but who also still think that their body is like basically unreliable, annoying, because the perception is that it's annoying, whereas actually we have this incredible machine that is like fine-tuned like a clock. Like every single month we have like these performers, like we have been hit, and then we have ingrained in your body is like restore time and back up. So Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I mean, just having listened to you explain it in that way is very different from, any way that I've ever heard the female body and, performance around, female athletes and how they look at a monthly cycle and how it affects them or what it means. I've never heard it explained that way. And I think it's about changing the conversation because we're, it's defiance a little bit, in a way, in that you're working against decades and decades, not centuries of understanding, female versus male in one way that has always dominated. And and it's time to change the conversation. That's going to be very difficult to do, but and it will take time. And but I think that continuing to get that message out there to not only coaches, but also the athletes themselves, both male athletes and female athletes, to get that message out there and to just continue to hammer it at home so that it continues from a repetitive standpoint to change that perception.
Yeah.
But you have to hear that. And then, there's so many different things. It's just like with anything else. I mean, there's so many different things in our lives that we experience that reinforce the conventional perspective that women are weaker than men. I mean, there's so many things that we wouldn't even be able to necessarily identify because it's very subliminal a lot of times. That there's another message that isn't overt, but it's reinforcing the idea that women are weak and men are strong, or, whatever.
Yeah. Or like falling partner, like had research, like in research, Dr. Stacey Sims, like her sentence is, women are not small men. And I think like a lot of the perception of women is like, oh, women are weak and fragile to babies because they're like they menstruate and when they carry a baby, etc. But you would never say like a 200-meter runner is like weak because afterwards you're like taking a rest, or like someone climbing a mountain is weak. And like women, when they produce a human, they're like the super machine producing a human. But we still have this perception that we are like, weak, little, fragile beings. Yeah. So we're changing that. And also, like, and then like 3 last questions. One, what are your sports now that you're like a retired, like fastest man on the planet? Like, what are your sports that what excites you in activity?
Yeah, I mean, so I just train just to, I mean, now it's always interesting. I think, certainly, coming from the US, so we have a very different sort of perspective on sports and fitness where, when we think about sport, it's actually competing, in something, like as opposed to where it's like fitness or recreation. It's like, if I go out, go paddleboarding, I like going to hike and those sorts of things. Like you might say, well, that's your sport, but it's not sport to us. It's like, I'm not competing against anybody. So when people say, oh, what's your sport now? Like, I don't do one, but but also I just get in the gym and, I love going to the gym every day. I have a gym in my house, so I'm able to do it there. But I love being active. Anything that allows me to be active, because I spend so much time traveling and meetings and working. So I enjoy that break. It's my opportunity to sort of get away from everything.
Yeah. And now surfing.
Well, not yet, but this afternoon. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. And then are there people that you like really inspired you like throughout your life or today?
Inspiration for me, has always been sort of ongoing. There are lots of people that inspire me, from athletes to musicians to people in business, people who, are trying to do things that nobody else is doing or trying to do things in a different way, always inspire me. Pioneers inspire me. So I've always been inspired by people like that.
Yeah. And any fears that you might have?
I think, at certain times we all have, some fears. I think most important for me is, not so much focus on the fear that, around, and I mean, I'm thinking about, things that I might want to accomplish, like, I'm going to be able to do that, or, things that are hard, I'm going to be able to do that. as opposed to focusing on, the fear, I tend to focus on, why is that? Why does that scare me? What is it about? Where's that fear coming from? And then how do I overcome it? But yeah, there are always things that scare me, but just because something scares me doesn't mean I want to
challenge.
It almost, like as an example, there wasn't fear that I had before every race, that there was an extreme nervousness that I had before every race. And I love that feeling. It's an uncomfortable feeling, but I love that feeling. That's the one thing I miss about competing is that moment, 30 minutes before the race is going to start. And like that moment where I'm thinking, okay, that race is going to go off here in a bit. And in that 19 seconds, after that's over, I'm either going to be Olympic champion or not, and that nervousness around that and the competition. I love that feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about nervousness and you think about, many people equate the nervousness to fear. They're two completely different things, but they're very close. I love it. So being afraid of something doesn't make me afraid. I'm not afraid of being afraid.
Yeah, I love it.
I guess.
And then, it's actually really interesting because it's also excitement.
Yeah.
It's scary because it's uncomfortable. It's different.
Exactly.
But whoa. Yeah. Pushing the boundaries. Awesome. Michael, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Such a joy having met you, hang out.
Yeah.
And can't wait to see what you're doing now, and we can change the world better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sports.
Thanks.
Thank you.